Loki is the third TV installment that Marvel has released in the year 2021 and is generally perceived by the public as the best out of the three. The show does have some decent work, including music and actors' performances, but after my second watch of Loki, I'll show you why I think it's the worst piece of content Marvel has ever produced in their cinematic universe. Before I get started, of course this video contains spoilers, so please exit while you can if you haven't watched the show and you don't want it to be spoiled. Otherwise, let's get started. As much as I would like to compliment the performance of Tom Hiddleston, Owen Wilson, and Sophia DiMartino, their characters are absolutely unbearable to watch in this show. They did, however, play their characters as best as they could, but their characters, if you can even call them characters, are terribly written. Since this show is called Loki, let's talk about the Loki we are familiar with, the captured 2012's Avengers Loki. God, we have lots to talk about. The main Loki we see in this show is not the redeemed and beloved one we know from Thor Ragnarok and Infinity War. Instead, this is the 2012's Avengers Loki, who is no weaker than Thor in combat, and also he could catch Hawkeye's arrow without even looking at it.
I'm hiding. Sylvie, stop.
Loki's powers are clearly very inconsistent. He is strong when he needs to be, and weak when the plot needs him to be. He even shows us powers that we have never seen before, like when he pushed the whole falling building back in place. But somehow he forgets to use his powers lots of the time. The show quote-unquote restored the lost character development by letting Loki watch the videos and clips of his life. This is not only problematic in terms of quality of writing, and it is also problematic in the sense of realism. It was already established in Endgame, with the example of Nebula, that a character doesn't just gain their development by watching their future life. One needs to experience their life-changing event, not just clips of it. You can say that different people react differently, but it doesn't change from the fact that this is one of the worst ways to regain character development. And also, it is really not convincing that Loki can go from
killed 80 people in 2 days
to whatever this Loki is. What really frustrates me is that later on in the show, we see the existence and usage of a time loop prison, which would have been a perfect thing to be used for forcing character development. Imagine if when Loki was first captured by the TVA, Mobius puts him in a time loop prison with something he regrets doing, or even just making him relive his natural path of life. It would still have been a bad way to restore the lost character development, but it would be way more persuasive than what they did with his character here. The impact of experience versus the impact of a video is clearly not the same, and I think we can all draw experiences from real life to that conclusion. After Loki regained his character development, actually this Loki is even worse than the Loki in Ragnarok. This one is a literal puppy dog, or according to Mobius,
Little pussycat.
that Sylvie and Mobius bring around with. Loki follows the plot around and gets told of everything. His old character is further assassinated with, "You know what? I'll show you these scenes myself."
I'd never stab anyone in the back. That's such a boring form of betrayal. I'd never do it again, because it got old.
Loki, I don't even know if this is gonna work.
You go, I go. It's cold.
Hold on. Isn't he a frost giant? How the fuck does a frost giant get cut? Whatever.
I just want you to be okay.
To be honest, I don't recognize this Loki. This isn't the Loki we know from Ragnarok. This isn't the god of mischief who sacrificed himself to try to assassinate the Mad Titan himself. And no, this is definitely not the Loki who invaded Earth in 2012. That Loki was cunning, scheming, and competent. He only failed because he did not expect the Avengers to unite against them. I don't see how the Avengers Loki can turn into this piece of useless junk in a matter of days. As much as I would like to explain why the other characters also suck, I simply don't care about them enough to talk about them. There are more important things to talk about than those, like the... We all know that the show Loki suffers from the slow syndrome, having way too much exposition. And surprisingly, the plot of the show is absolutely dreadful if you remove all the exposition scenes. And the content can definitely be finished within 2 episodes. The show starts with the Avengers Endgame scene with Loki. He teleports himself to the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. The Gobi Desert looks nothing like this, but you know, that's not their fault. And also, why did Loki choose here out of all the places to teleport to? It's not really my problem, but go on. The TVA arrives soon after Loki did, and Loki gets captured by the TVA easily with the purple function stick. Huh? Why was this never used again in the show? Okay. He was arrested because he violated the sacred timeline according to the TVA. He was sent to trial and Mobius pleaded for his life. Loki agrees to work with Mobius to capture a Loki variant and also to keep his life. Loki tried to escape, but only to learn that in the TVA, even Infinity Stones have no power, and chooses to embrace his foretold future. After an unfruitful expedition, he tests his apocalypse theory and finds enough evidence to lead them to where Sylvie's hideout is. Sylvie manages to stall Loki for enough time for her plan to work. Hold up. Time? Isn't this a time traveling show? How can time be an issue? Let's continue. With her plan being bombing the timeline with reset charges. And hold on again. Aren't these things only supposed to reset? Since when did the show establish that they can do damage? Sylvie managed to stall Loki for enough time for her plan to work, and heads to the TVA to kill the timekeepers. Loki follows Sylvie into the TVA, but just before both of them are going to get pruned by Judge Renslayer, Loki portals them out to Lamentis during its destruction event. They team up to try to get off the planet, but their plan ultimately fails. They begin to bond with each other after they have given up hope, which causes a variant timeline, allowing the TVA to locate and arrest them. With the help of Mobius and... oh fuck, did she have a name? I'm not doing numbers. I'm just gonna call her Lady Chungus. With the help of Mobius and Lady Chungus, Loki and Sylvie manage to kill the timekeepers and discover that the timekeepers are just robots, implying that someone is behind everything. Loki gets pruned before he could explain his theory to Sylvie, leaving Sylvie to work temporarily with Judge Renslayer to find out the exact information she needed that might possibly lead her to the real timekeepers. Hold up, did Sylvie just leave Lady Chungus on the ground like that? Whatever. Sylvie then prunes herself to get to the end of time, purely because she thinks the real timekeepers are beyond the end of time. Back to Loki. We discover that pruning does not equal death. Loki survives by meeting a few other Lokis. Classic Loki, Kid Loki, Boastful Loki, and Alligator Loki? Whatever. They have a fight with many other Lokis and escape without Boastful Loki. Okay, what was the point of introducing him as one of the good guys? And why are these Lokis so dumb? None of these have any traits of the Loki we know, besides the betrayal part, which was mean to the absolute bottom of the barrel. The escaped Lokis show our Loki the monster Alioth, and they agree to kill it and escape together. Going back to Sylvie, after she's self-pruned, she encounters Alioth and almost accidentally enchants it. She was saved by Mobius driving in an old pizza advertisement cart. Wait, you're telling me that something that slow can outrun the freaking creature that is responsible for cleaning up the mess of the timeline? Okay. I wonder how this thing can clean up a Galactus or a Thanos with all the Infinity Stones. We will come back to this. Sylvie meets up with the Lokis. Wait, how the fuck did she just meet them by chance? Even us as audiences don't have any idea on how big this world is. And just before they're going to execute their plan of how to deal with Alioth, The other Lokis just casually decide to stay in this world and walks off. I guess the plot no longer needs them, so they gotta fuck off now. Classic Loki sacrifices himself and distracts Alioth for long enough that Sylvie and Loki manage to enchant it together. After Alioth is enchanted, a portal appears to discount Hogwarts. Sylvie and Loki enter the castle and meet Kang. Actually, no, that name was never used. Instead, the only name assigned to him was He Who Remains. They talk for about 30 minutes explaining everything, most of which is the same as the little animated video from episode 1. Sylvie defeats Loki, portals him out, and kills Kang, releasing the multiverse. End of season 1. Now that everyone's familiar with the plot, let's get into why it was written with a little care. In a well-written story, the flow of tension of the plot usually resembles a bell curve, but in terms of tension building, we have no tension building. As we know, the first few episodes were mostly exposition, but at the end of episode 2, the show sets up enough tension for it to take off, and ends up not doing anything with them. When they showed the scene where the people in the TVA were panicking over how many variant timelines were spawning, it honestly felt like something was happening. Maybe the TVA struggles to keep the timeline in order for a while, or maybe the Timekeepers aka Kang has to step in himself to fix the issue. But unfortunately, the next time we actually got to see the TVA, everything was in complete order and it seemed like nothing had ever happened. The tension generated from the potential of all of the sacred timeline falling apart literally disappeared and never mentioned again. In the beginning of episode 4, we get to see a glimpse of what the Timekeepers look like. This was an important scene as it shows the audience their background presence. The downside of what they did here is that literally in the same episode, these so-called powerful beings were killed off. We were told about these beings in episode 1, and episode 4 is when we get to see them. This scene would have been put into greater effect if it was shown earlier, so the audience would feel their looming presence, maybe even their control. An equivalent analogy would be establishing the presence of Emperor Palpatine and then killing him off within 30 minutes of the same movie. That's what they did in the sequel trilogy, isn't it? Fuck's sakes, let's not get into that. The last episode of Loki also struggles to fit in the flow of the plot, as most of the episode is back into a stage of exposition, Kang talking and talking and talking. Coming from episode 5, an episode filled with tension, episode 6 is a straight insult. Most of the episode is absolutely boring, and at the end, there is a forced fight scene. It is almost like they already knew that they were signing another season, so they didn't even bother finishing any plot or any characters. You would not be able to tell that this is a seasonal finale if you watch it with the next season. I believe that the writer is capable of writing a better tension flow for the show, but why he didn't, I do not know. The show has a few important revelations of truth that change the views of the audiences, like the one in episode 3 where Sylvie reveals to Loki that the TVA agents are humans who had lives before their lives at the TVA. There is a reason why this revelation from Star Wars is so much more emotional. It is because we as audiences learn of this information at the same time the relevant characters do. The fact that Mobius isn't there to react to such important information at the same time as the audience gets to, it dampens the effectiveness of the revelation. I'm going to use Star Wars again for an analogy. Imagine Darth Vader tells a random dude like Boba Fett that Luke is his son, and later on, before Boba Fett falls into the Sarlacc pit, he tells Luke that Vader is his father. This is a bizarre scenario versus the canon universe, where we as audiences learn the plot twist the same time as the character who this information is relevant to, in this case, Luke. We can see a clear difference in the effectiveness of the plot twist. And are there any in this show that stands out? Definitely not the one here. I would definitely like to talk more about the plot, but I think what I mentioned is enough to conclude the problems within the plot. Unfortunately, the plot is not the worst thing in the show, and I need to save myself some time to talk about the next point, which is the world building of this show is an absolute abomination. Not only does it do damage to what is in this show, it also destroys the whole MCU and what we invested into the universe. God, I don't even know where to start for this. You know what? Let's start from the last episode since some information is changed by the plot twist. Hope you can bear with me here. This section is probably going to be longer than the previous two. The show finishes with the world-wrecking confirmation that the entire universe has been predestined. That the one who remains organized the multiverses into one timeline to avoid another multiversal war. There are many issues that exist with this one sentence already. First of all, what is a multiversal war? There is no way that entire universes fall against each other for dominance. I don't believe that whole universes can align themselves to fight other universes. Second, why does he need to change the whole timeline? The only thing that would start a multiversal war are variants of himself. Just prune your own variants. There is no need to commit mass murder just to make sure yourself exists. Third, we are going to talk about the biggest issues with what the writers wrote. The predestination. Every single event that happened in history, well, what we know of the MCU history, has been scripted. You don't believe me? Here's the proof. It is an interesting way to push the world forward and raise the stake higher than they did in Infinity War and Endgame. But it also destroys everything that came before the show, and even after, until the predestination is over. If Thanos decided to do good with his stones, he would have been pruned. If Hawkeye sacrificed himself instead of Black Widow, he would have been pruned. How if Uncle Ben survived the shooting, him and the shooter would both have been pruned to try again and again until Uncle Ben dies. What a damn joke. There's no longer any choice, any stake, as far as much as we know, nor any free will in the MCU, for both the past and the future. The fact that this information is casually revealed to the audience in episode 1 is quite disappointing. They had presented it in a short animated video like it was nothing. And also the fact that none of this information was changed besides scratching off the timekeepers and putting Kang's name there instead is absolutely disappointing. Everything to ever happen in Marvel has been and will be set in stone. Fourth and lastly, Kang organized all of the universes into one timeline, meaning that it directly conflicts with the scene in Doctor Strange.
This universe is only one of an infinite number. Worlds without end. Some benevolent and life-giving, others filled with malice and hunger.
This shows that none of the writers nor any of the producers and directors actually watch enough Marvel content to be familiar with the universe they are adding on to. If they don't care about the previously established world building, why should we as fans care about their work? Not only does the greater scale makes no sense, the detail in this show also failed to be logical. The pruning of variants and split timeline is a weird system because it doesn't delete things, they only get transferred to where Alioth is. A creature that devours the living creatures only? When it devoured the ship here, it didn't seem like any of the ship was eaten by it. Also, judging by all of this junk on the planet, this seems more like a junkyard. So how would they be able to fit absolutely everything they have dumped here? Unless there are more planets and more allies to clean them up, there is no way they are able to fit all of the timeline's variants here. Kang showed the Lokis a scene where all of the Kangs are fighting with the stick. Why would they use the stick? One side of the stick can either slow people down or send them to the end of time. The other side is just a pointy end. I would assume all of them will have a temp pad, so if they prune each other, all they need to do is use the temp pad and portal out. In this case, where Kang fights Kangs, the pointy end would have been more useful to make sure the enemies don't come back. As Alioth has yet to be weaponized, whoever gets pruned just gets ported to the end of time and nothing will happen to them. If the primitive end is more useful than the technological end, why wouldn't they just use guns? It is the 31st century after all. Speaking of which, why are there no projectile weapons in this damn show? Even the Wakandans realized the spears are dumb and made them shoot lasers. Pruning to where Alioth is also not a promised step, as shown that almost all of the Lokis survived. If the Lokis can survive, other people definitely can. How even Frog Thor survived. There would have been a full-on united resistance movement against Alioth, an unimaginable team, like Iron Man siding with Thanos, or something even crazier because their goal is simply just to survive. When interests align, anything is possible. The people in the TVA treat pruning as a synonym to death, but that is an extremely dangerous idea. Anyone with the ability to port or time travel can easily escape from the end of the world, effectively making pruning effectless. Kang really should have provided TVA with a better thing than those pruning sticks. I don't know, maybe something like the Grandmaster's melting stick instead? Mentioning the TVA, let's explore it together. It is an organization established by Kang to make sure that multiverse do not produce another Kang than the one sitting at the end of time. They do not know the existence of Kang. Instead, they know their creator as the Timekeepers. Why did Kang need to mask himself behind these robots? There will have been no differences at all. Hiding behind these Timekeepers just seemed to be a useless information besides being a plot twist for the show. The TVA's workers believe that they were created by the Timekeepers, and somehow, some of them do not even know what Infinity Stones are. Actually, this front desk dude, I think his name is Casey, doesn't even know what a fish is. How is it possible that these creatures selected by Kang to work for him aren't all geniuses like Einstein? If you're leaving people in charge with such important tasks, wouldn't you want capable people to work for you? Realistically speaking, the TVA should have only the elites of the elites for workers. The TVA is also a very large organization, but we don't see any duplicate humans, even though some are named with numbers implying that identity doesn't matter as much. As shown in this shot that the building seemed infinite, I think we can safely assume that the TVA we get to see is only a fraction of the entire organization. But what we do see is a 60s aesthetics-based world with the fusion of future technology that somehow still uses paper to store information, while we literally see holographic technology being used to search and display information later on. The time cop part of the TVA is not any better than the rest. Whenever there is a branch from the sacred timeline, a group of hunters is dispatched to the time and location. They will identify the variants that caused the Nexus event after they exit the portal, then arrest the variant and reset the timeline. If this is all of the equipment that the TVA has to arrest someone, I wonder how they deal with
Kree, Titans, vampires.
it. Has so many issues because how would they be able to deal with that? Actually, let me choose a more realistic option here. Since they die to fire, proving that they do not have magical protection, how would they be able to deal with someone who has a gun or any projectile weapon? God, this is so stupid. After they arrest the variants, they would then bring them to trial and give them a chance to plead. Most of the variants would not know what they did was quote-unquote wrong under the sacred timeline. Just like Loki, most of the reaction should be not guilty as they would not have been shown what they would have done. If this is a way for them to judge whether an individual can be recruited to the TVA or not, it is absolutely absurd. With the way Judge Renslayer trialed Loki, there's a tiny chance anyone can be recruited. The TVA being part of the canon MCU has many logistical issues, but they're going to ignore this in the future anyway, so why should I care? I understand that the Infinity Saga is finished, and so are the lives of most of the heroes we loved. This show dumps on the Infinity Saga by saying everything was scripted. On top of that, they also wanted to remove the importance of Infinity Stones, and they managed to do it as casually as flipping a patty with a 50-inch TV. Not only do the people in the TVA use Infinity Stone as paperweight, some of them don't even know what they are. The show also shows people picking up Tesseract like a toy, comparing it to the way Red Skull treated it. I understand this is them saying, oh look, how silly it was for all of these heroes to fight for these tiny stones. But looking at this scene, what was the point of Black Widow sacrificing herself for the Soul Stone? What was the point of Wanda killing the love of her life to keep Thanos away from killing half of the world? What was the point of all of these soldiers from Wakanda and New Asgard fighting for the future of the universe? This takes away the investment the audience had for the movies and the characters. Why should we care if the Avengers were going to achieve their goal if all they needed to do is to come here to the TVA, and they will have infinite amount of Infinity Stones? I know that the comic book fans are going to tell me that the stones only work in their own universe, but that is not the case for the MCU with what they established in Endgame, nor was it ever mentioned anywhere to be a factual statement in the cinematic universe. The show has a weird human centrism involved with every single place we get to see. Well, specifically Earth human centrism. They have already shown us that the MCU is filled with alien humanoid civilizations with the Guardian movies, but throughout the entire show of Loki, only one non-human humanoid was shown, and it was a Skrull in episode 1. Well, besides the Lokis, but who can even differentiate them from Earth humans at this point? The TVA is full of humans, and seemingly only humans from Earth, and no human-like creatures like Asgardians or others. This brings in the question of why do Earth humans control everything? Why is a human clown sitting at the end of time? His clown also uses modern lingo, implies that the English language experienced no change over 1,000 years, which is historically impossible. It is the easy solution the writers and producer did to avoid having to spend money on CGI and cosmetic makeups. But man, is it disappointing in a fantasy world. With all of these events only involving Earth humans, it feels like the universe has been shrunk down. The show displayed things that are supposed to make the MCU feel small, but somehow with these decisions, they have made the show feel small and insignificant to the MCU movies. The Marvel Cinematic Universe currently has 24 installments, and actually 25 by the time this video gets released, as well as countless amount of side TV shows, whether they're canon or not. These include the Netflix series, the ABC series, and also the official canon MCU Disney Plus series. Some have conflicted with others, but none has outright destroyed as much of the world building the same way Loki did. To be completely honest, the future Marvel content producers are just going to ignore these issues, addressing this wreckage again and giving it enough sense to fit in with all of the world building is nearly impossible for the writers in these recent years. At this point, you might have already categorized me as a hater, but no, I actually did like and enjoy some parts of the show, one of them being the music. The background music in the show is absolutely great. Some might hate me by saying this, it reminds me of the works of Howard Shore in Lord of the Rings and John Williams in the original Star Wars trilogy. I'm not claiming that I know everything about music, nor do I know enough about how exactly these music were made, but these were pretty effective. I do not know if it's because there's nothing else for me to focus on, or the music is just good, but it did elevate some of the scenes to its design purposes. The performances of the cast is also great. Everyone loves Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson, and their performances do match their reputation. But when these talents are being wasted on these characters, performance can only do so much to upgrade badly written characters. I enjoyed episode 5 because I was fascinated by Richard E. Grant's classic Loki. In fact, I would even go as far as saying he is the best Loki of the entire season. I wanted to see at least a full episode dedicated to him, on how he survived Infinity War and ended up here, but they couldn't even grant me that. Guess I was disappointed after all. Personally, I did actually enjoy the 60s aesthetics. There's a nice break from all of the visual fuckeries from the CGIs, but it was poorly justified. They did not provide any reasons on why it was even there. All we needed was a single comment from Kang along the lines of, "Oh, I love the 60s US, I grew up watching the movies from that time." And we didn't even get that. From all of these points that I have mentioned, you might not see them as issues, and that is completely fine. You can call me a nitpicker, but it is kinda hard to turn my brain off and watch things for a second time. I am not trying to stop people from enjoying the show, and I myself sometimes enjoy badly made content. But it does not stray from the fact that this show, at its essence, is a piece of garbage. As far as we know, the writer of the show will be writing for Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, and to be completely honest, I'm not looking forward to watch it. I will watch it, but I'm not holding any hope at all. With all of these issues in the writings of Loki, I cannot see the coming Doctor Strange movie as a movie of quality if the writing does not improve. Who knows, maybe I will be wrong about it. Loki is a superficially good show, a silly, funny, interesting spin-off with a popular character from the MCU. This is not something I personally would tell you, but this is the general opinion with the mainstream critics. I mean, this show has a higher tomato meter than Infinity War. Usually spin-off shows explore more of the world within the box, and this show shreds the box and starts talking about the outside. Maybe this show isn't for me, or maybe you should treat it as seriously as I did. Hi there. You watched it to the end. This is Guai, and welcome to my channel called Second Watch, where I produce video essays after my second watch of movies and TV shows. I definitely watched Loki more than twice for this, so the title is sort of a lie. If you think I'm wrong or I haven't mentioned enough, you're welcome to express yourself in the comment section. I worked hard for this, so if you enjoy my content, please leave a like or a dislike if you have hated it. But hey, I am planning on another video. Potentially it will be on Black Widow, could also include Shang-Chi and future Marvel content if I drag on long enough. Most likely it will be titled somewhere along the lines of The Death of Marvel. Stay tuned. Yeah, I know the movie name is Shang-Chi, but no, I'll tell you what. I'm Chinese and it's not Shang-Chi, it's Shang-Chi. But, you know, who gives a shit? I don't. Bye bye.